All right, welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar, The Anatomy of an Effective Privilege Management Program with PAM expert and identity architect at Deloitte, Australia, Itai Harel. You're also joined by Anishan, who will run through a brief overview of the Beyond Trust Privileged Access Management Solution Power Broker towards the end of the webinar, so please stick around for that. My name is Sarah, your webinar host today, and I'd like to kindly remind you that all attendee lines are muted. However, we'd like to make these as interactive as possible, so please submit your questions via the GoToMeeting console anytime throughout the webinar, and we'll cover them at the end during our Q&A time. So anytime you have a question, just pop it on in, and I will be monitoring those throughout. Also, today's session is being recorded, and all attendees will receive a link to the recording and the slides shown here today within 2 business days from now. So now that that's all out of the way, I'd love to hand this over to Itai, who will jump right in. Hello, welcome, and please take it away. We're super excited to have you here today.
Hi, hello everyone. So my name is Itai, and I'm working at Deloitte. I'm an identity architect, a solution architect, focusing on privilege and access management, designing, deploying them, and yes, I'm excited to be here. So we're not going to spend too much time about what is privilege access management or privilege accounts are. I think most of the guys or everyone who joined this session understand what privilege accounts are, and we're trying to focus on the challenges on implementing such a technology or running such a project. On one slide, privilege accounts exist everywhere in every connected device, database, application, and others. They are certainly the most powerful accounts that have access to sensitive information. They are rarely changed because they are running on applications and other stuff known to many, shared, and there's literally no individual user accountability, which makes it more complicated. There are more than just the system administrators who use them. Many third parties, external vendors like Deloitte, where we go and implement the technology. We get our own so-called service or privilege account to do that. Runs on applications. Pretty much even social networking account managers use them. Hidden, or I would not even say we're only managing or addressing passwords. It's all about credentials. So SSH keys, client certificates, even Windows hashes that hide behind the scene on a Windows environment are privileged and have provide remote access or privileged access to your environment. That's about it as a background. And I'm going to start with a kind of an article or a Gartner market guide for privileged access management, which I read almost a year and a half ago. And I usually do that as part of my role. And it's a lengthy or it's a big slide. It talks about privileged access is a major focus for security and infrastructure and operations leaders looking to prevent and detect breaches, maintain individual accountability, and increase operational efficiency. We know that when you drill down into the key findings, and again, that's Gartner, it talks about prevention of both breaches and insider attacks. It talks about the second bullet, PAM tools allow organizations to comply with high trust requirements for privileged access, and it goes on and on. And then there's a third bullet. Organizations starting with PAM deployment often struggle to achieve the desired business value due to a mixture of political and cultural issues. That got me interested, because why is Gartner talking about that in a market guide when he's talking about different vendors or the technology around it and so forth? Why is it so important to put it in a key finding? And in the summary, it also mentions, although PAM tools are typically simple to install, using them pervasively requires a change to an organization's process and culture, and therefore requires buy-in from all parties that require privileged access. That can be a lengthy exercise. Now, that got me a bit worried at the time. Why is Gartner mentioning that? Is it going to be a tough one for me to implement, to deploy, to develop? So I logged into my favorite website, Security Architects Partners. I am a security architect. I am a partner. and it seems, I'm browsing it once in a while. And I found this interesting article, and pardon me for the language here. Privileged account management, or PAM, is necessary, but deploying it stinks. Oh, that's a bit harsh. But continue reading this article. It's online. You can go inside and read about it. He talks a lot about what PAM is. But the devils are in the details, or is in the details. To just scratch the surface of PAM basics, there's a lot more to learn. The basics sound good in theory, but when customers get into real deployment, they're likely to encounter some super challenging issues. To name a few, PAM may be resisted as an inconvenience by administrators. Password vaults can become a single point of failure. We need to discuss high availability and DR. Load balancing, performance and scalability concerns around such a technology, because we do need to facilitate for 100 or more concurrent sessions in some cases. Logging and integration with enterprise SIEM should be a key part of PAM's value, but marrying PAM or integrating PAM to SIEM is not a trivial matter. It's very easy when in the vendor's brochure or white paper, but identifying the right information, passing it through both ways, sometimes tricky. Integrating with ticketing systems, again, kind of out of the box capability, but if you drill into the bits and bytes and what you do need to do, a bit tricky. And the last point here is video session recording files. For most PAM vendors providing some kind of proxy functionality, lack the metadata to enable timely reviews and alerts. Monitoring them may require many staff to do manual reviews in places like Singapore, and there's a lot of sessions. Now, I'm not sure why you mentioned Singapore, but I kind of have a short story around that. So one of my customers from Australia asked his colleague, another financial service or a big bank in Singapore, how do you address all those massive or endless numbers of recordings that we take on all those privileged sessions? We store everything, we record everything. Somebody, what are you doing with this? And the guy from Singapore said, he said it up front, very easy. You've got 100 guys reviewing it all day long, day and night. The guy from Australia said, really? 100 guys? Oh, that's too expensive for me. Don't we have an around? Don't use some kind of automation, some logic around it? No, we just use 100 guys. So that's a naive solution for that problem. There's too much data, too much information, and sometimes you can get lost or not be effective. So the bottom line is as follows. I don't need to change it, I just need to read it. If you believe your end user IT environment may be vulnerable to malware or anything else, or insider threat, plan for PAM as a core preventive and monitoring technology. Absolutely, I agree. That's why we're here. Create a detailed functional architecture and design for deploying PAM and integrating it with your directory service, identity provisioning, ticketing, SIEM, and other tools. Define the scope of the initial project carefully. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Phased approach. That's really important. We're going to discuss that in a few moments. Break the project up into chunks that can actually be delivered and produce benefits along the way. Show progress. Or discuss success metrics or success criteria along the way. Don't rely on a PAM software vendor to do too much custom integration, and pardon me, Sarah here, with your internal systems. Use a carefully vetted system integrator to do the hard work. I'm kind of hitting myself, but that wasn't the point here. Take control of your architecture and maintain internal subject matter expertise. Run communication and training programs to maintain buy-in from business stakeholders and administrators. You need to engage with the end users all the time and allocate plenty of time for testing or for integration. So those were articles I read a while ago, and I kind of made those introductions to what we are usually, or what I'm usually proposing and deploying or implementing with my customers. So usually there's a PAM project. The regular activities or events is there's a business case which is approved. We're asked to help with the vendor selection. We're choosing the best vendor across, and then the project starts running. The project kickoff, a design and architecture phase, an implementation phase, which includes integration, testing, you name it. Everybody's happy. We're almost in a BAU state. We're running a pilot. We're onboarding certain set of accounts, Windows accounts, Unix accounts, database accounts, maybe some network devices and so forth, and running some kind of pilot. And then everybody's happy, everybody's signing the SOW, we get paid, and we're off. When I go and meet the customer in 6 months' time, I sometimes, or in many cases, well, hopefully not now, but I used to find this outcome. The PAM technology or the PAM solution becomes a kind of a technology to only store and manage and handle password of last resort. Those break locks, emergency credentials, like the default administrator on a Windows box and a root account on the Unix box, SA account, enable account, such accounts. Sometimes it's just a keep us replacement. We're just migrating those credentials from one less secure repository to a proper secure repository, but not pushing it forward. And I don't like using this terminology, but in many cases, the customer or the technology just becomes a shelter. Nobody is really using it. Now, why is that? I think, or Deloitte thinks, that PAM should be treated as a program and not as a project. A business case is approved, a vendor is selected, there's the project and the BAU phase, but instead of a project, we would like to take the program approach. Now, why is that important? A project insinuates that there is an end date or a point at which an organization can declare, I'm done securing privileged accounts. That's it, done. I can tick the boxes. However, this is a short-sighted declaration and will ensure that organizations taking this approach will be left with issues in the future as technology evolves and new attack vectors arise. By contrast, the program indicates a long-term approach, a long-term support, and a continual review of effectiveness. A program can adapt and pivot to new priorities in a constantly changing technology landscape and can take into consideration the occurring change management when introducing a new tool. Now, the change management is the most complex and challenging fact or event or activity that I found when I'm working with customers. Now, let's drill a little bit into the details here. So, in high level, a PAM program looks like that. That's before me adding the added value. That's the usual typical or project plan. You've got a phase 1, requirement gathering, discovery, more or less business use case, design and architecture, implementation, testing. And obviously this is a bit naive, but I didn't want to clutter the slide too much. This is in high levels, and the length here might be short, might be long, depending on the customer or the complexity of such an implementation. What I would like to discuss is the following. I would like to introduce streams. Stream A, which is an operating model, and another phase, which I call the phase 0, just because I need to stick it somewhere before I start requirement gathering, discovery, or certainly before design and architecture. Phase 0, which is the program foundation, those that are highlighted in green here. Now, the length, again, really depends on the deployment, on the customer. It doesn't have to be 6 months. We can do it, or I did it sometimes in 2 or 3 months. I've got a customer that we're still doing it for more than a year now. But on average, 6 months, 5 months, or maybe 4 months is a good length to address operating model. And we're starting to guess what it's going to do or what we're going to address there. Let's drill to this into or more. Let's talk about the PAM foundations first. Discuss how to plan a PAM program and how this PAM foundations helps. There's a lot of activities around PAM foundations. We don't have to address them all. I'm certainly not going to address them all in this session. It's way too much. And but I'm going to discuss the maturity level or model, priority model, test metrics, why is it so important, and certainly the common pitfalls. The output from that should be a clear duration and resources required in the program and a prioritized event or activity and the accounts that we're going to onboard. Maturity model sounds very naive. We know That's not always the stakeholders or the ones who are having the money or kind of helping you land that program are aware of this. Level 1, credentials management. Again, very naive, secure or store those credentials within a secure repository and manage them, rotate them, allow you to retrieve it and access those devices. Level 2 is session management, a bit more complex, allow the end user to transparently connect to the target device without exposing the credentials to the end user. It also introduces an isolation, a proxy solution inside it, recording those sessions and more. So there's more than just session management. There's an audit plan of it and so forth. Level 3 is least privilege, more complex in many cases because such a technology or more than that, such a model already exists within the customer. So least privilege allows you to log on as a regular end user, but provide you with a certain set of permissions and privileges to do your specific work. Now, that's usually a harder task to do, and that's my level 3. Level 4 is addressing hard-coded embedded credentials within applications, web interfaces, you name it. Obviously, this is way more complex because it's non-human interactive. Applications require 24/7 those credentials in order to work. You're not sure what you're breaking once you're starting to do that. But it is very important. And in the background, there's always analytics or behavioral or abnormal behavioral analytics of privileged activities running in the background. So that's the high-level model. But you can even go even further or drill down into it and say, look, the maturity level 0 is unmanaged. That's what I have now, to be honest. I'm just talking as a customer now. There's no big gain around it. Maturity level 1, which might be my target state, is to store those credentials within a proper secure repository. All fine. The gain is that privileged credentials are stored in a secure central location, reducing the risk associated with insecure storage of these credentials. I've seen it just yesterday, credentials stored within the spreadsheet, LastPass, KeePass, which are great, but have other challenges. Maturity level 2 is managed. We're starting to rotate those credentials, whether those are password, SSH keys, or maybe others. So the gain here is that the workflows may be configured to manage the accounts in question. Additionally, you now ensure that users cannot use the password without first retrieving it from the PAM tool, got a proper audit trail around it, and you are sticking to your policy. You can even implement a one-time password policy around it and keep changing it whenever, changing the password whenever somebody retrieves it. Maturity level 3 is the isolation. It's introducing this proxy which allows you to connect transparently to the target device. So that's even more in detail than what I introduced in the former slide. That's the maturity model. The output is to kind of identify them and say, okay, what is the target state? Maybe maturity level 2 is good enough for my organization. And what are the phased approaches, or what are the phased activities that I'm going to do in order to get there? Because in no way you can jump into maturity level 2 from day one. It's just not going to work. Same concept, just a better or a nicer slide describing the same concept, what we're trying to achieve and what are we gaining from it. So password storage, maybe not too much, password access a little bit more. Then we need to introduce some kind of auditing workflow process pattern around it in order to audit what was retrieved and accessed and so forth. Next is password rotation, managing it, and session management. Same concept in a different view. I'm going to discuss now PAM priority model. So now it's the big challenge. How are we going to get quick wins? How are we going to show that we're doing something effective, efficient in a relatively short time? In order to do that, we need to kind of prioritize those accounts that we want to onboard. So first, we're going to measure the privileged accounts risk. The scope of influence, does it address everybody, 1,000 administrators or only 10 administrators? Does it address end users, just regular users? Does it only address a certain skill group like DBAs and so forth? Level of privilege. If you're a domain admin, it's different than just, well, I wanted to say a DBA, but DBA has its own risk, a big risk around it. The level of privilege compared to others. And the ease of compromise. How easy it is to compromise domain admin accounts versus just a regular domain account. And then we're going to measure the implementation complexity around it. How complex is it to implement or to store and manage those kind of accounts? And what's the time to value? So if we're going to do that for each and every account type, and we're going to assign risk scores and implementation scores, we're going to get some kind of a table or a matrix that helps us prioritize those accounts. Now, this is nice to show it here, but let me lead you to the next slide. And I kind of said, let's just give a real-time example of something I did with a customer. So let's take the domain admins, as I mentioned before. The scope, there are not too many domain admins. To be honest, there are around, well, currently there are like 60 domain admin accounts within this organization, but we just popped it into 20. We're going to reduce it. We did an exercise of reducing those domain admins as a first stage. So the scope is not much. One, the level or the risk around domain admins is 75, which is the highest score here. If the domain admin credentials has been compromised, you are now facing a global or you are now facing the biggest risk you have. Literally, you can access each and every Windows box in the organization. And the risk of compromise, how complex is it to do that? Well, it really depends on training, on how this does work. With this customer, it was around 3 because they were very strict using sandboxes and so forth. So the risk score is around 9. The complexity of locking down those domain admins accounts, because there are not so many, pretty easy. They are shared by default. Those are not named accounts. Those are generic accounts. The complexity is pretty much easy. The time to value is really good because it's really easy to do. So the implementation score is 10, and altogether it's around 19. If you compare it to a DB admin, you will find that you're not too far away, but the score will be 12. And that's a debate. You don't always have to agree with me or this customer in this case, but you need to kind of build it as part of this priority model. Another example is AWS Management Console. Again, it kind of fits in the middle. The level of risk around it is pretty much very high because most of the resources for this customer is around or built provision on AWS. There's a big risk around compromising such access to AWS Management Console with the account that has permissions to provision, spin, change instances around it. That's a very important exercise you need to do before in order to plan your activities and prioritize them. And now you can identify quick wins, accounts that have high risk and easier to implement, and long-term investment accounts that must be addressed but complex to implement, and you might put it in the plan for later on as the next phase or phase 4 whatsoever. Taking those together and what we discussed before, we can have a proper phase approach which will continue to, so for example, phase 1 will be to store, then to manage, remotely access, and kind of factory onboarding, and that will be done on tier 0 assets or tier 1 assets, which are the domain admin ones, the most risky ones, most prioritized accounts we identified. Step 4 and above, it's the continuation of the same process again and again, but for tier 1, tier 2, and later on other credentials that we prioritize later in the priority model, priority table. We're then going to need to start addressing the maturity level. So begin management of service accounts and applications, as you can see in step 4 or step 4 plus, and explore list privileges and up whitelisting or blacklisting, some call it gray listing, around it. So this is again just an example, a real life example of the kind of how we're going to plan this program. Next, success metrics, KPI, key performance indicators. Those are really important. You really need the senior management buy-in for the program in order to progress. I've seen so many PAM projects or PAM programs that just failed over the fact that nobody was really pushing forward and there was no kind of success criteria or kind of measurement of what success is and how we're going to push the program forward. So this is really critical. Those are only examples. You can drill into them, but we together, or you need to define your own success metrics which are achievable and works for you. Again, instead of just putting a nice or a slide, I'm going to give you a real life example of a success or delivering maturity metrics which we build for a customer. And this kind of metrics tries to show a vector or a progress. So there's an onboarding phases where we onboard block 1, 50% of the devices. In this case, most of them are network devices. 50% of administrators or network admins are using the PAM in phase 1. Phase 2, we're going to edit more. So 90% of the devices are managed. And then block 3 is 100% and so forth. So we want to show a progress. We must show a progress. Very naive, but that's the only way to kind of force walkways for the stakeholders to continue investing in the program, and for the end users to say, guys, I know it's challenging. We need to keep on pushing. That's part of our role and responsibility. Now, that's a nice slide, integration with other enterprise solutions. The reason I added this slide is part of the scoping the PAM program or the PAM program is to identify and understand that there are so many integration points with privilege and access management systems. It's endless. And you know what, looking at it now, I kind of miss several. So vulnerability management system, cloud integration with AWS, Google Cloud, you name it. It's all part of integration that is maybe sounds like out of the box, but requires sometimes big or sometimes small effort. But it requires an effort, and you need to give enough time for them for such integration in order to make it happen or to make it happen. I've seen too many times that not enough time was provided for integration. With PAM, not only 1, 2, or 3 integration points, but many, and it will keep on growing as long as we go. So the idea here is just to highlight the fact that we need to provide enough time here. We can plan it, we can calculate it, but it depends on your requirements. So taking everything into consideration, phase 0 sometimes or usually looks like the following. Pretty detailed here, so I won't go all the way into the fine print here, but we would like to develop a priority model. We would like to develop a maturity model. We have to approach the skill groups, those Unix guys, Unix team, Windows team, DBAs. Each and every one has a different workflow process pattern that they currently use, set of tools that they currently use. You need to kind of introduce the tool as early as possible in order to get some feedbacks and concerns and special needs and try and address them as early as possible. Because if you find out that you need to integrate, for example, SQL Developer for the DBAs in your PAM tool because that's the only way they are accessing those databases, it might not be as easy as it sounds. So creating a pilot environment might be even part of this phase. And validating the access control designing the role-based model, which is sometimes not aligned to what current and existing customers do. Most customers have a named account approach, an ADM account for each and every user, a privileged ADM account that they use. But that kind of model does not work with some tools, or usually does not work, and there needs to be some kind of migration into a managed account concept. Now, I know I'm not sharing too much information around this, but this is one of the biggest challenges we have. Nothing to do with the tool, we need to migrate to the right process. Okay, operating model, can be 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. An operating model is the operational design that makes it possible to deliver the business strategy and incorporates people, process, organization, and technology. Technology is the least important one here. It is the one that kind of sits in the middle and dictates what's happening. The process and the people are so affected by this technology that we kind of need to even, I can call it, migrate into it. So there's a lot to discuss around the operating model. So what I decided to do is to just give some examples, because our time is limited, your time is limited. And the examples that I'm going to share with you are things that I'm now working with customers around the operating model. So for example, in the Windows domain world, named account versus generic managed account. Again, this customer is using a named account, Sarah_ADM, I_ADM. That doesn't really work with a PAM technology or a PAM tool. We need to kind of migrate and find the right process around it. Tools that administrators currently use to access devices, as I mentioned, people develop some kind of Windows client, not always supported in the right version, the PAM tool is installed on and so forth. So those tools need to be kind of integrated with the PAM tool. It's a big challenge. Integration of existing and proven workflow to work with the PAM tool. Currently, it's been done with some kind of process. Sometimes it's either ServiceNow, Remedy, or others. Sometimes it's a manual process. Sometimes it's over email. We need to kind of fit and see how it works with the PAM tool. We cannot just keep this phase. Interactive scripts running from the user desktop. So we got it all figured out, but then the guy tells you, I'm literally running a script for hundreds of scripts for my desktop, and when the script starts, he asks me for the credentials. So I need to kind of type it in. Oh, that definitely doesn't work. So all of this is part of the operating model. A clear understanding of the new workflows and patterns used with the PAM tool. Now, in summary, how does it look like? So it's the same slide that I've seen before, or presented before, with the Stream A, which is the operating model, and the phase 0, which is the program foundation. But obviously, again, that's a bit naive. There's a lot of testing around it, and if you take the phase approach into consideration, there's also, or it is also important to put in the PAM program a phase rolled out to skid groups and a kind of a repetitive rollout to the next group or the next type of account or device. We're going to address domain admins, then maybe VM admins, then Unix guys, later on DBAs, maybe later on network administrators, and so forth. So the phase approach is with each and every one inside the phase rollout to skid groups, the vector or arrow. There are certain maturity levels of certain activities like securing, storing, managing, accessing, remotely accessing, and other stuff. So putting it all together, it might look like that. And that's again in high level. To be honest, it's a kind of more than high level. Common pitfalls. So hearing what I'm saying, what Gardner is saying, what my fellows in the architect partners or security architects forum are saying, we can identify the following. First of all, the concept of project versus a program. The process of achieving something just by deploying technology and the infrastructure for that. By itself, it's not going to work. But usually that's where projects end. Jumping ahead in maturity models, frustration and lack of confidence in the technology because you're trying to grab more than you can. You're not taking a phased approach. Really important to do that. If you build it, they will come. Now, it really worked for Kevin Costner in his Think It's a Dream movie, but it's really not going to work here. If you're not going to address those stakeholders or those key groups, show them, demo them, discuss how it's going to work best for them in order not to affect their operational requirements, their SLAs, in order to access those devices, it's just not going to happen. You're just going to have a system that does not deliver the outcome. And in many cases, untrained PAM support or BAU teams affects the rollout. Why? I would love to say that PAM is simple. Sometimes it is, but in high level, because it addresses so many technologies, so many integration points, so many accounts, and so many devices, it is complex. And we need to have a proper team, a local internal team, to support those end users before getting them frustrated and just saying, you know what, I'm not going to do it. Great. So going back to the Gartner Market Guide for Privileged Access Management, which, you know, I was listening to Gartner, does that make sense now? All those bullet points that are highlighted in green, just because it's a Deloitte slide. I kind of understand now why they really highlighted this one in the market guide, and just to make sure that customers do not forget how important this is for you guys. That's about it. I would like to thank you all, and I'm going to pass it back to Sarah. And yeah, thank you.
So go ahead, Ani, and the line is all yours now.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, Itai. That is actually really insightful. And I think one of the things that at least I have taken away from this is that, in fact, a privileged access management solution can be complex to deploy, but there definitely are some key wins that you can use. You can get pretty much instantaneously some quick wins, which can accelerate the growth of a PAM solution. So really thank you for that presentation. So before I start, I just wanted to introduce everybody to Beyond Trust. And I know a lot of you know of Beyond Trust already, but for all those who don't, you know, Beyond Trust has been around since I think 1985. We were one of the first organizations or companies to actually develop and enhance solution and least privileged access across Unix and Linux. And we grew from there to incorporate Windows, Macs, and then essentially privileged password management. So there's a couple of questions that I would be sort of answering, basic questions that I would be answering as part of this presentation. One is the why. Why do you really need a privileged access management solution? And then the other one is how, you know. So I'll put an emphasis on why primarily, because I think that's very crucial for this message. But let's take a quick look at the page you addressed today. You know, the first is insider threat. When you hear stolen credentials or usernames and passwords or administrator rights, you're in the world of privilege. And securing and controlling those privileges to eliminate those insider threats is a big part of our mission at Beyond Trust. So if you look at the Verizon report, 55% of insider misuse incidents were tied to privilege abuse in the previous year. And of course, once attackers find a way, they can do a lot more damage by taking advantage of the systems, by the vulnerabilities, such as outdated software, to install malware, to install tools, and then finally steal data. I think one of the obvious things is the nature of how people or attackers get access to systems. And that is essentially, it's a standard script. Exploit any known patches, exploit any lack of patches or known vulnerabilities, and then gain privilege access, root-like access, admin access onto systems, and then pretty much do whatever you want to do. And Itai briefly touched on this when he said that privilege essentially is and can be a vulnerability. So how long does it take for a customer to figure out if they've been breached? Well, the answer is 256 days. And that brings us to the hidden threat. All too often, we hear of breaches like Sony Pictures, for instance, that are discovered months after the initial compromise. Now, these attacks typically target specific organizations and leverage inside information. So whether executed by insiders or external attackers, evidence of malicious activity can sometimes be hard to pinpoint. Privilege access is at the heart of many of today's most high-profile breaches. And if breaches weren't enough, there's a growing list of compliance regulations that you need to adhere to, that you need to manage with regards to privilege users. So let's take a quick look at why this is the case. I mean, if you look at it this way, first up, you've got employees and other insiders that have unnecessary access. Employees, vendors, contractors, and other insiders are often given excess access to systems and data. And this is often needed to, do their job. But without the right discipline and accountability, these access rights are just pathways to data. So privilege abuse can be malicious, as with Edward Snowden, at NSA, or it can be accidental, such as when outsiders attackers gain privileges through phishing or hacking. And next up, you've got enterprise credentials, essentially the keys to your kingdom. And these are shared and unmanaged. This means that passwords cannot be created and shared, but aren't audited, or they're not monitored or managed with discipline or accountability. So what happens? Finally, of course, you've got, once the attackers find the way in, they can do a lot of damage by taking advantage of system vulnerabilities, such as outdated software, to install that malware or that toolkit to steal customer data. And this happens because you've got desktops, you've got laptops, you've essentially got servers and applications that communicate to each other, that have got these data paths between each other, and also host sensitive information, but are an easy target if they've not been patched or have vulnerable applications sitting on them. So when it comes to the Beyond Trust strategy portfolio, we pretty much look at all facets of these attacks. We look at the external attacks. We look at attackers that are looking to exploit a user or a system that might be vulnerable, that might have unpatched systems, etc. to it. And then we look at the insider threats as well, people who've got excessive privileges, people who don't really need those privileges to do their jobs, unmanaged passwords, or the lack of accountability of any privileged credentials, all these things which relate to insider threats. And then you've got the hidden threats, stuff that you simply don't know about. Increased frequency of sophistication, you're getting all these anomalies in your system as a result of something that's happening. And we look at all these three things in the stack of PAM and not separately, and provide customers with a solution that's the length and breadth of privilege access management, and just not siloed to either privilege password management or least privilege, or in fact just Active Directory bridging. So finally, if you look at the Beyond Trust stack of solutions, you've got the PowerBroker privilege account management suite of products, which essentially looks at least privilege across Unix, Linux, Macs, and then the privilege password management side of things, which looks at privilege session management, password management, password controlling and seeing who's got access to what credentials, how they're accessing it, so on and so forth. And then for all those non-Windows systems like Macs, Unix, Linux, etc., have some sort of a central repository to be able to manage them using things like Active Directory bridging, or indeed manage things like central sudo management. And of course, because we believe that a privilege in fact can be a vulnerability, we've been able to integrate Recna, which is our vulnerability management solution, into most of what we sell in the privileged account management side of things. And to couple that, to give everybody a clear picture of what's going on, you've got Beyond Insight, which offers you clarity analytics, tells you if there's an anomaly inside the environment, and it does everything from asset discovery to asset profiling, etc., to integration with third-party software and systems. So that's pretty much it from my side, and I'll hand this over to Sarah.
Yeah, Ani, if you could go to the next. Yep, that's perfect. And you guys, let's jump into our last poll here and then some Q&A. And here at Beyond Trust, we'd love to help you with your privileged access and your vulnerability management needs. Would you be interested in engaging with one of our security experts further? We'd love to chat or walk you through a more thorough or an actual one-on-one demo, since the demo wasn't shown here today. And if you select yes, somebody will be in contact with you to schedule a demo so you can see the product in person and at your own convenience and your own time. So I'm going to leave this up. Let's dive into a couple of questions. Ani, this came in for you. So how is your solution deployed? Ani, are you there? Did I lose you? Okay, let's go ahead into, let's talk to Itai. So what are some best practices for implementing PAM?
Oh, I think those 20 slides that I've shown. To be honest, the phase approach is really, really important. Planning it and putting the right priority with each and every one to show some wins. If you don't show these wins in a few months' time, or depending on the complexity, you're just going to lose it. You need to keep up the momentum. You need to address the policies, the patterns around it, the workflows, and not only the technology. This is important, or the most important part, but it is a tool which needs to be, when we talk about integration, it's not only integration with other systems, but integration with the organization. I think that's the main key for success.
Absolutely. And another question for you. So how do you see user behavior analytics and PAM interplaying in the future? Do you have any opinion on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Just like with other technologies, and you know what, even robotics going in, like starting to be really affecting operational environments. And just like the example I mentioned before, you cannot have just a split of 100 guys working on and analyzing those recordings, those text-based recordings, understanding what the guy was doing on those videos and so forth. You need to kind of have an automations around it. You need to correlate an abnormal behavior to a specific session that this happened. This is provided by an analytics model. I didn't even mention that, but also a discovery model is very important. Again, it's part of the automation around those kind of tools. You think you know what you have, but when you run a discovery tool, you find out that you have way more privileged accounts, service accounts, you name it, in your organization than you thought of. So in general, not only threat analytics or analyzing abnormal behavior, but automation around those tools. This is where the market is going with everybody.
Okay, great. So those are all the questions. Thanks everybody who submitted questions. We really appreciate it. And I would like to remind you all that you will be receiving an email with a link to the recording and the slides shown here today within 2 business days from now, and it will come from communications@beyondtrust.com. So make sure that email alias is whitelisted to receive the follow-up email without interruption. Then you can refer back, you can rewatch, you can share with your colleagues, take notes, whatever. So all that will be into your inbox in 2 business days from now. A huge thanks again to our speakers, Itai and Ani. You guys are rocked. You guys got a lot of information in less than 60 minutes. Really appreciate your time today. I'm sure everybody on the line really appreciated it too. And to everybody who attended live, we really appreciate you guys being here, being interactive with us, sending in questions. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. We will see you at the next webinar. Take care, everybody, and goodbye.